Let me say something you might need to hear today. Silence is not a sign of strength. It's not deep. It's not mysterious. It's not love. Sometimes silence is just disrespect, dressed up as calm. We've been taught to romanticize the quiet one, the one who doesn't say much, the one who disappears and reappears like it's some kind of power move. But let's call it what it is: emotional unavailability. Here's what I want you to know. You deserve someone who chooses clarity over confusion, who talks, not ghosts, who shows up, not vanishes. Because when someone is silent, you do all the talking in your head. You write their excuses. You justify their distance. You fill the space with hope while they give you nothing. That's not love. That's emotional labor you're doing alone. You know what a real connection sounds like. It sounds like, I care about how you feel. It sounds like, let me explain. It sounds like, you're not alone in this. And if you're not hearing that, if what you're getting is silence, then maybe the message isn't in the words. Maybe the silence is the message. Now listen to me carefully. You teach people how to treat you. When you accept silence, you're silently agreeing to be overlooked, to be last priority, to be someone's convenience. But that's not who you are. You are not a background character in someone else's story. You are not a placeholder until they feel like talking again. You are worthy of presence, of words, of effort, of someone who shows up consistently, not just when it suits them. So if someone's silence is hurting you, ask yourself, what would you say to a friend in your exact situation? You'd say, don't chase someone who can't even send you a sentence. Don't stay where your voice is met with quiet. Don't confuse waiting with loyalty. Let me remind you of one truth. It is better to lose someone who cannot communicate than to lose yourself trying to decode their silence. Your value doesn't decrease when someone refuses to speak. Your worth doesn't shrink when someone disappears. You are not hard to love. They are just too quiet to notice how special you are. So today, I'm not asking you to fight for them. I'm asking you to fight for you, your peace, your clarity, your confidence, because you were never meant to sit in silence, wondering. You were meant to be heard. Silence is not always peace. It can be neglect. We often associate silence with serenity, with calmness, with the absence of conflict. And yes, in some moments, silence can be beautiful. It can be the stillness that lets our thoughts settle, or the comfort shared between two people who don't need to fill the space with noise. But not all silence is born of peace. Sometimes, silence is the sound of someone giving up on communicating with you. It can be the symptom of emotional detachment, avoidance, or even quiet punishment. And when that's the case, silence doesn't feel calm. It feels like confusion, tension, and rejection wrapped up in stillness. Neglect doesn't always arrive in the form of cruelty. Sometimes it shows up quietly. No screaming, no fighting, no dramatic exits, just the slow fade of messages left on read, calls that go unanswered, questions that hang in the air without ever being acknowledged. It's the moment someone chooses to turn away rather than lean in. They shut down, walk off, or simply stop engaging, and suddenly, you're left sitting with the noise in your own head, trying to figure out what you did wrong, what they're thinking, if they even care anymore. That's silence. That's not peace. That's neglect masquerading as calm. And here's the dangerous part. When someone uses silence as a way to control the narrative, when they choose not to engage, so they don't have to be accountable, they place all the emotional weight on your shoulders. You begin to imagine the worst. You fill in the blanks. You justify their silence with reasons that protect your image of them. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're just going through something. Maybe I'm overreacting. And little by little, your standards for how you expect to be treated begin to shrink. When silence becomes the norm in a relationship, romantic, platonic, or even professional, it creates a kind of emotional starvation. You stop feeling seen. You stop feeling important. And yet the absence of clear rejection gives you just enough hope to stay. Because they didn't say goodbye, right? They didn't end it. But they also didn't show up. And being left in limbo is its own form of quiet cruelty. You're stuck in the space between their presence and their absence, hoping something will shift, that they'll speak, explain, reassure. But sometimes they never do, and every day they remain silent. Your self-worth takes another hit. It's not just about the absence of words, it's about the absence of effort, the absence of emotional presence. When someone truly values you, they will make the effort to communicate, to clarify, to connect, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because real connection isn't built on convenience, it's built on showing up. And when someone consistently chooses not to do that, they are telling you something, not in words, but in silence. And you have to learn to listen to what that silence actually means. Not what you hope it means, not what you want it to mean, what it actually is. We live in a world where communication is easier than ever. A text takes 2 seconds, a voice note less than a minute. So when someone can't even give you that, when they consistently choose silence over simple honesty, you have to start asking, is this really about them being too busy or not good at talking? Or is this about emotional neglect being normalized in your life? Because let's be clear, emotional neglect doesn't have to be loud to hurt. In fact, the damage of silence can be far more lasting than words spoken in anger. With words, at least you know where you stand. With silence, you're left trying to figure it out on your own. And that kind of guessing game erodes your self-esteem, your confidence, and your sense of security. People who care make it known. They don't vanish without explanation. They don't leave you stranded in uncertainty. Caring looks like consistency. It looks like vulnerability. It looks like staying emotionally engaged, even when the conversation is uncomfortable. Silence, when it becomes a habit rather than a moment, is not respect. It's not patience. It's not emotional depth. It's disconnection. And it's important to recognize when someone is using silence to avoid accountability, or worse, to avoid valuing you. You deserve real presence, not just someone physically near, but emotionally tuned in. You deserve communication that feels mutual and sincere, not breadcrumbs of interaction when it suits them. You deserve to be in spaces where silence feels safe and supportive, not anxious and empty. Because if the silence between you and someone else constantly leaves you feeling ignored, unsure, or invisible, it's not peace, it's emotional abandonment in slow motion. And the sooner you recognize it, the sooner you can choose something healthier for yourself. Communication is connection. It's the lifeline of every relationship, romantic, platonic, professional, or familial. Without it, even the strongest bonds erode. We often underestimate just how much power words hold, not just the grand declarations, but the everyday check-ins, the small reassurances, the casual, "How was your day?" It's in these moments that trust is built, emotional intimacy is nurtured, and people feel seen, heard, and valued. When communication is present, connection thrives. It creates a space where two people can exist authentically. They can express joy, frustration, insecurity, hope, and fear, without the fear of being misunderstood or dismissed. It's not about always having the right words. It's about being willing to share, being present in the dialogue, and caring enough to stay in the conversation, even when it's uncomfortable. Because real communication isn't just about talking, it's about listening, deeply, intentionally. Listening not just to respond, but to understand what's behind the words, what's beneath the surface. Think about how often people drift apart, not because of a major betrayal, but because communication slowly died. Texts go unanswered, calls become rare, conversations become shallow. And without realizing it, two people who once felt close become strangers walking through a shared silence. That distance doesn't usually come from a lack of love. It comes from a lack of communication, and that's what makes it so dangerous. It's subtle, it sneaks up on you. You assume everything's fine, until one day you realize there's more silence than speaking, more guessing than knowing. Connection cannot be sustained on assumptions. You can't expect someone to just know how you feel, or what you need. You have to say it. You have to express it. Because nobody is a mind reader, no matter how close they are to you. We create intimacy by revealing who we are, not just the highlight reel, but the honest, messy, complicated parts too. And that takes courage. Vulnerability is uncomfortable, but it's also essential. If you're not willing to show up in a conversation with your real thoughts and emotions, the connection remains surface level. It might look good on the outside, but underneath, it's fragile. In any relationship, silence grows like weeds. If you don't actively tend to communication, misunderstandings start to build up, resentments take root, and soon you're not responding to what the person said. You're reacting to everything that's been left unsaid. A small issue explodes because it carries the weight of all the unresolved ones before it. That's what happens when communication is neglected. It's not just about the words you didn't say, it's about the damage those silences create. People often say, "I didn't want to cause a fight," or "I didn't know how to say it," so they keep things to themselves. They suppress the discomfort, hoping it'll fade. But it doesn't fade, it festers. What we don't communicate clearly becomes tension, and tension always finds a way to express itself, usually at the worst time and in the worst way. So instead of preserving peace, by staying silent, we end up sabotaging the very connection we were trying to protect. Healthy communication doesn't mean you always agree. It means you can disagree with respect. It means being able to say, "I don't see it that way, but I want to understand your perspective." It's the willingness to work through conflict rather than avoid it. Avoidance doesn't strengthen relationships, it weakens them. Every time we avoid a hard conversation, we trade short-term comfort for long-term disconnection. When someone chooses to communicate with you honestly and openly, it's a sign of deep respect. It means they care enough to let you in. It means they trust you with their truth. And when you respond with that same openness, you build a foundation that's incredibly strong. Not perfect, but real. And real is what sustains love, trust, and loyalty. We often think of connection as chemistry, shared interests, or physical attraction, but those things fade or fluctuate. What keeps people close is the ongoing exchange of emotional presence. It's the constant choice to show up with your voice, your ears, and your heart. Whether you're checking in during a busy week, having an uncomfortable conversation, or simply saying, "I'm thinking of you," those moments are the glue that holds people together. At the core, communication is how we say, "You matter to me." It's how we affirm someone's existence in our life. Not just through big gestures, but in the small, consistent ways that say, "I see you, I hear you, I want to keep knowing you." Without that, connection slowly dies, not with a bang, but with a quiet, invisible drift. And by the time you notice it, it can feel too far gone. That's why we have to stay committed to communicating, honestly, kindly, regularly. Because connection isn't just something we find, it's something we build, one word at a time. You teach people how to treat you, whether you realize it or not. Every interaction you have with someone sets a precedent. It sends a message about what you will accept, what you will tolerate, and what you won't. The boundaries you enforce or don't become the silent rules of engagement in any relationship. When you allow certain behaviors to go unchecked, you're giving permission for them to continue. And over time, that permission shapes the dynamic. People watch how you respond. They watch how you react to being interrupted, disrespected, ignored, or taken for granted. If you let it slide, they take note. If you laugh it off, they assume it's okay. If you keep giving chances without any change in behavior, they learn that there are no consequences. And not because they're inherently malicious, but because human behavior tends to follow patterns. If something works for them, if it allows them to get what they want without discomfort, they will likely keep doing it. That's why your silence often speaks louder than your words. You might say you value respect, honesty, effort, But if your actions show that you're willing to stay in situations where those things are missing, people learn that your words are negotiable. They realize that they can get by with the bare minimum, and you'll still be there. And eventually you start feeling resentful, not just toward them, but toward yourself, for not drawing the line sooner, for not standing up for your own needs. But that's the hard truth. We train people on how to treat us based on what we accept. It's easy to blame others when we feel mistreated, and sometimes that blame is valid. But there's also a level of responsibility we have to take, because teaching someone how to treat you isn't about controlling them. It's about showing up consistently with self-respect. It's about choosing to stay where you are valued and walking away where you are not. It's about speaking up when something crosses a line, even if it makes things uncomfortable. It's about not confusing being understanding with being a doormat. Being kind doesn't mean being passive. You can be compassionate without sacrificing your dignity. Every time you choose not to speak up, every time you ignore that pit in your stomach, you are prioritizing someone else's comfort over your own self-worth. And while it may seem harmless in the moment, it builds. One overlooked comment turns into regular dismissiveness. One cancelled plan without apology turns into a habit of flakiness. One moment of disrespect turns into a pattern of disregard. Until one day, you wake up in a relationship or friendship or work environment where your needs are invisible, your voice is ignored, and your worth feels diminished. And here's the thing, people don't change just because you wish they would. They change when the environment around them changes, when they are held accountable, when the old ways no longer yield the same results. If someone is used to you always being available, always saying yes, always making the effort while they give nothing back, and you suddenly stop, if you pull back, set a boundary, demand more, they will either rise to meet that new standard or remove themselves from your life. And either outcome is clarity. But you don't get that clarity by hoping people will just figure it out. You get it by making your standards visible through your actions, by being consistent with what you allow, by not bending your boundaries every time someone gives you just enough attention to keep you hanging on. You don't have to yell, fight, or make dramatic exits. You simply stop giving energy to people who show you, through their behavior, that they are not ready to meet you where you are. You deserve relationships that nourish you, not drain you. You deserve to be around people who respect your time, your energy, and your emotions. But it starts with you. You set the tone, you send the message. Every time you stand up for yourself, you raise the standard for how others must engage with you. Every time you walk away from mistreatment, you reinforce your worth. You're not asking too much by expecting effort, honesty, or consideration. You're just asking the right people. And the right people won't need to be reminded twice. Because when you teach people how to treat you with confidence, clarity, and calm, the ones who are meant to stay will step up, and the ones who aren't will step out. Either way, you win. You are worthy of clarity and emotional maturity. You are not here to live in a state of constant guessing, confusion, or anxiety over where you stand in someone's life. You are not built to exist in relationships where mixed signals are the norm and communication feels like a battle. Clarity is not a luxury. It is a basic emotional need. It's the difference between feeling secure and feeling disposable. Emotional maturity is not some rare trait you're lucky to find. It's a requirement for any relationship that's meant to be healthy, respectful, and lasting, and you deserve nothing less. It's easy to get caught up in dynamics where you are constantly trying to decode what someone's silence means, what their sudden mood shift implies, or why they pull away just when things feel close. It's easy to start blaming yourself, thinking maybe you're too much, maybe your needs are unreasonable, maybe if you were different, they'd finally open up, or give you consistency. But that narrative is not yours to carry. Someone else's emotional immaturity is not your fault. and it's not your responsibility to fix. You can offer patience, support, and understanding, but that doesn't mean sacrificing your own emotional well-being to accommodate someone who refuses to meet you halfway. You are allowed to ask for clarity. You are allowed to say, "I need to know where we stand," or "I deserve honesty." You are not needy or dramatic for wanting to be with someone who communicates instead of disappears, who faces issues instead of avoids them, who doesn't weaponize silence or passive aggression to control the emotional tone. Emotional maturity looks like accountability. It looks like being able to say, "I hurt you, and I take responsibility," instead of deflecting or making you feel guilty for having feelings. It looks like being willing to have hard conversations, because the relationship matters more than personal ego. Too many people stay in situations where emotional maturity is missing, thinking if they just wait it out, the person will change. But time doesn't fix emotional immaturity. Effort does. Awareness does. And unless someone is actively working on themselves, no amount of love or patience on your part will magically transform the dynamic. You don't heal a broken connection by tolerating behaviors that break you down. You don't build clarity by accepting confusion. You create it by demanding alignment between words and actions, by expecting emotional honesty, and by walking away when it's not there. The problem is, we often romanticize emotional unavailability. We mistake it for depth. We tell ourselves that the person who's inconsistent is just guarded, or mysterious, or going through something, and maybe they are. But you can acknowledge their struggle and still recognize that you are not obligated to suffer through it. You are not a rehab center for emotionally disconnected people. You are not here to prove your worth to someone who can't see it. Emotional maturity is not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about showing up with the willingness to grow, to learn, and to care deeply in a consistent way. You deserve the kind of clarity that doesn't leave you overanalyzing every text or replaying every conversation in your head. You deserve to be with people who make you feel emotionally safe, not emotionally drained. You deserve someone who says what they mean, who means what they say, and who backs it up with real behavior. You deserve communication that is open, honest, and kind, even when it's uncomfortable, because discomfort in communication is inevitable, but disrespect and manipulation are not. When you make space for emotional maturity in your life, you raise the bar for everyone around you. You stop settling for surface-level connections that are built on charm but lack substance. You stop explaining away someone's inability to express themselves. You stop normalizing dysfunction just because you're afraid to be alone. Being alone with clarity and peace is far better than being with someone who keeps you emotionally unsteady. Love without emotional maturity isn't love. It's chaos dressed up as chemistry. Your heart is not a playground for people who haven't learned how to treat it. Your mind is not a puzzle to be solved by those who communicate in riddles. You are worthy of people who are emotionally present, emotionally aware, and emotionally responsible. You are worthy of directness, not dodging. You are worthy of transparency, not confusion. You are worthy of relationships that feel grounding, not destabilizing. And once you fully understand that, you stop chasing emotional breadcrumbs and start choosing emotional alignment. Because your peace, your clarity, and your emotional health are not negotiable, they are necessary. It's better to lose someone than to lose yourself. That's not just a comforting phrase, it's a truth you come to understand the hard way. When you begin to bend who you are to keep someone in your life, when you start to shrink your voice, suppress your needs, and rewrite your boundaries just to maintain a connection, you're not keeping the relationship alive. You're slowly watching parts of yourself die in the process. And the scariest part is, sometimes you don't even notice it happening at first. It starts subtly. A moment where you silence your opinion because you don't want to upset them. A time when you ignore something that bothered you because you're afraid they'll walk away. Over time, these small choices become patterns. You begin living in constant negotiation with your own values, hoping that if you just do enough, adjust enough, sacrifice enough, they'll stay. But the price of holding on to someone who doesn't respect who you are is far too high. You start to become a version of yourself you no longer recognize. You laugh a little less. You walk on eggshells. You rehearse your texts before sending them, trying to get the tone just right so you don't come across as too much. You wait for them to decide when and how the connection matters. And you build your schedule, your energy, your emotional state around their inconsistency. And somewhere in that chaos, your own identity gets buried. Your joy fades. Your confidence erodes. Your sense of what you deserve becomes blurry. And all for what? For someone who only stays as long as it's easy for them. For someone whose love feels more like a transaction than a partnership. Losing yourself isn't always loud. It can be quiet, almost invisible. It happens in the name of love, in the name of loyalty, in the name of trying to make things work. But real love doesn't ask you to sacrifice your truth. It doesn't ask you to abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. If someone only accepts a watered-down version of you, it's not really you they care about. It's the version they can control. And you are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be chosen by people who only love you on their terms. You are here to be seen, heard, and respected in your full expression. Anything less is not love. It's attachment. It's fear. It's settling. Walking away from someone can feel like a loss, especially when your heart is still invested. But staying in a relationship that costs you your peace, your self-worth, and your authenticity is the real loss. You can grieve someone and still know that leaving was the right decision. You can miss them and still recognize that staying would have meant abandoning yourself over and over again. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that loving someone doesn't mean they're right for you. You can have deep feelings and still realize that the dynamic isn't healthy. You can hold compassion for their pain and still choose your own healing. The fear of losing someone often makes us tolerate more than we should. We convince ourselves that things will get better, that they'll change, that we just need to hold on a little longer. But at some point you have to stop asking, how can I make this work? And start asking, at what cost? Because if you're constantly sacrificing your happiness, your peace, and your sense of self just to keep them from leaving, they're not truly there. You're not in a relationship. You're in survival mode, trying to hold everything together while slowly falling apart inside. The truth is, the right people won't make you choose between them and your well-being. They won't punish you for having boundaries. They won't withdraw love when you assert your needs. They'll want you to be whole. They'll celebrate your growth. They'll communicate instead of manipulate. And they'll stay not because you begged them to, but because they recognize your worth. And that kind of connection never requires you to lose yourself. That kind of love doesn't feel like a constant battle. It feels like home. So even if it hurts, even if the silence after they leave is heavy, even if the space they occupied feels painfully empty at first, trust that you are making room for something healthier, for someone who doesn't just love the idea of you, but respects your truth, for a version of yourself that isn't dim to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. You don't need to be less to be loved. You don't need to perform to be chosen. You just need to be honest with yourself about what's costing you more than it's giving. Because at the end of the day, if the choice is between keeping them and keeping yourself, the only real answer is you. At the heart of it all, your peace, your truth, and your emotional well-being are not things to be compromised. You deserve clarity, consistency, and connection that doesn't require you to shrink. The people who are meant to be in your life will never ask you to sacrifice your identity for their comfort. They will meet you with emotional maturity, they will speak with honesty, and they will stay without needing to be chased. Silence, confusion, and mixed signals are not signs of depth. They are signs of someone who has not yet learned how to love fully. You are not too much for asking for communication. You are not difficult for having standards. You are worthy of a love that honors you, and friendships that reflect the same. And sometimes, walking away from what's familiar is the only way to return to yourself. Because losing someone who can't meet you with the respect and emotional presence you deserve
is not a loss. It's a step back toward your own power. Protect your energy, speak your truth, set the standard. And remember, the right connection will never require you to abandon yourself in order to keep it. You deserve better than silence. You deserve you.